All right, let's dive in. Today we're taking a deep dive into some really thought-provoking excerpts from Sigmund Freud, specifically his Civilization and Its Discontents. You ever wonder why happiness always feels sort of just out of reach?
Oh, yeah, constantly.
Well, Freud, he really goes for it in this book. And get this, he kicks things off by exploring this thing called the oceanic feeling.
The oceanic feeling.
Yeah, picture this. A friend writes to Freud, and he's describing this deep, profound sense of like no boundaries, like being totally connected to the universe.
Hmm,
He thinks this feeling, it's the root of religious sentiment, you know?
interesting.
Now, Freud, he's a man of science.
Right.
So naturally, he's initially like, what? I don't get it. He can't quite grasp this oceanic feeling that his friend is talking about. So like any good
You
scientist,
gotta investigate it.
exactly, he sets out to break it down through a psychological
A
lens.
classic Freud move.
I know, right? It's like he's saying, I don't get it intuitively, but let's analyze this thing. But hold on a sec. Think about this for a minute. Have you ever felt that feeling? Like complete absorption, that sense of oneness with something bigger than yourself?
Like being completely lost in the moment.
Yes. Maybe you felt it in nature or during like a powerful artistic experience
Yeah.
or even in moments of deep connection with another person.
Like you're part of something much larger.
Yeah, exactly. That's what Freud's friend is trying to get across.
And Freud uses this oceanic feeling to springboard into his whole theory of the ego.
Oh, the ego, that's a big one.
Huge. So, as you know, the ego is the part of us that's like, hey, this is me, and that's the outside world. It distinguishes between self and everything else.
The boundary setter.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Babies, they don't have that clear distinction yet.
Really?
They experience this kind of blurry oneness with everything around them.
It's like they haven't fully separated from their surroundings.
Exactly.
So could it be that this oceanic feeling is like a leftover piece of that early state, like a little echo of that primal sense of oneness?
That's precisely what Freud suggests.
Whoa, that's deep.
Right. He proposes that this oceanic feeling might be a vestige of that early stage of development.
A little piece of babyhood we carry with us.
Kind of.
Okay, hold on tight, because this is where things get really interesting. Freud uses this amazing analogy to explain how our minds work. He compares the mind to the city of Rome.
Rome.
Yeah, but not Rome as we see it today.
What do you mean?
He's talking about Rome as like a representation of all its historical layers,
Oh, I see.
all those different periods existing at the same time. Imagine ancient ruins standing right alongside modern buildings.
Wow, that's a cool image.
Right. Each era leaving its mark on the city.
So what's he getting at? What does Rome have to do with our minds?
Well, Freud's point is that our minds are kind of like Rome in that way. Early experiences, even the ones we barely remember, they stay present.
Alongside all the later stuff?
Exactly. They're not literally preserved perfectly, but they're woven into our mental fabric.
Like threads in a tapestry.
That's a great way to put it. And they shape our perceptions, our responses.
I've definitely noticed that.
Have you ever had like a childhood fear suddenly pop up, even though you thought you'd outgrown it?
Yeah,
Or
actually,
maybe a certain smell triggers a flood of memories you haven't thought about in ages.
that happens to me all the time.
That's Freud's Rome in action.
That's wild. So these early experiences, they become part of our mental architecture.
They influence us in ways we might not even realize.
It's pretty mind-blowing, isn't it? And it leads us to the core of what Freud's exploring in Civilization and Its Discontents.
Because if those early experiences are still kind of lurking within us, shaping how we see things,
It makes you wonder.
what does that mean for our search for happiness? Is it possible that some of our unhappiness, our discontents?
Are rooted in those ruins of our past.
Exactly. That's a
Yes.
great question. And it's one that Freud tackles head on. He starts by asking this really basic question. If the goal of life is happiness,
Which most people would agree with.
right, then why is it so hard to actually achieve? What are all the forces that seem to constantly mess with our pursuit of well-being?
That's what we're here to find out. So Freud, he lays out these three main sources of suffering that we all deal with.
3. Okay, let's hear them.
The first two are pretty straightforward, I think, like the raw power of nature, how unpredictable it can be, often totally indifferent to us and our well-being.
Yeah, nature can be brutal.
And then there's the fact that our own bodies, well, they're fragile.
Ah, right, we break down.
We decay and ultimately face death.
Okay, those are definitely big downers.
Yeah.
But, I mean, kind of unavoidable, right? Can't really pick a fight with a hurricane or the aging process.
True enough, yeah.
Hmm.
But it's the third source of suffering that Freud really dives into.
Okay, what's number 3?
The challenges of human relationships.
Ah, other people. As much as we crave connection, other people can be, like, the biggest source of stress.
It's a paradox, for sure.
We need each other, but also kind of drive each other crazy.
Totally. And that gets to the heart of what Freud's arguing. There's this inherent tension between what we desire as individuals and the restrictions society puts on us.
It's like that classic image, right? The angel and devil on your shoulders, whispering in your ears. One side's all, go for it, live your life. And the other's like, nope, rules, responsibility, gotta think of others.
I love that analogy. And Freud, he digs into all the ways people try to handle this tension.
Oh, the coping mechanisms.
Right. Sometimes we find distractions or what he calls substitutive gratifications.
Substitutive gratifications, that's a mouthful.
Basically finding pleasure in things that aren't the original desire. But, they offer some relief.
Okay, this is getting relatable. Like, ever have a stressful day and just devour a bag of chips, even though you know it's not the healthiest move?
All the time.
Or maybe you spend hours on social media when you should be working.
Procrastination nation.
Yes, those are classic substitutive gratifications, right?
Textbook examples.
And then there's intoxication.
Which we talked about a bit earlier.
Not just drugs and alcohol, right?
Nope, it's anything that alters our perception, helps us escape the everyday anxieties and frustrations.
So that explains my unhealthy obsession with true crime podcasts. It's like a temporary escape from my own boring reality.
Precisely. Then you've got the people who just retreat from the world completely, the hermits, the recluses.
Avoiding all the drama.
Trying to minimize those human interactions that cause friction. And then you have those who try to transform reality through delusion.
Transforming reality.
Often seeking solace in religion.
It's like they create a more palatable world.
Even if it's not entirely real.
Yeah, I get that. And then there's the search for fulfillment through love and beauty.
The classic romantic.
Which, let's be honest, can be just as tricky as all the other options.
Oh, absolutely. Love can be incredible happiness, but it also opens us up to a whole lot of pain and disappointment.
So no matter how we slice it, every strategy for dealing with this tension has its ups and downs.
No easy answers here.
No, not at all.
And this is where Freud's idea of a death instinct comes in.
The death instinct. Okay, that sounds intense.
It's definitely one of his more controversial concepts, but essentially he believed that alongside Eros,
The life instinct.
right, alongside that there's this equally strong drive towards aggression and destruction.
Whoa, hold on. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So it's not just that we have aggressive impulses we need to control. It's like there's an actual instinct pushing us towards destruction.
That's what Freud proposed. And he argued that this instinct is constantly battling with the demands of civilization.
That makes sense, I guess. Society needs us to cooperate, follow the rules, be productive. But this death instinct is like, nah, I want to break stuff.
It's constantly pushing back, creating internal tension.
Which can manifest in all sorts of ways.
Exactly.
It's like this epic battle within each of us. Creation versus destruction, constantly fighting for control.
A perfect way to put it. And this internal struggle, it mirrors the conflicts we see on a societal level, too.
Oh, I see.
Wars, violence, prejudice.
It's all that aggressive energy, but manifested in destructive ways.
Exactly.
So is Freud saying we're all just one bad day away from unleashing our inner chaos?
Not necessarily. Remember, he also talked about the superego.
Ah, the superego.
That internalized voice of authority and morality.
The one that's always judging us.
Sometimes. But it also helps regulate our behavior.
So it keeps us in check.
It's essential for maintaining social order, keeping those impulses under control.
So it's like the referee in this inner battle. Yeah. Between our desires and what society expects of us.
A great way to think about it.
But the superego, it can be pretty harsh, right?
It can be.
Think about those times you feel guilty or ashamed of certain thoughts.
Even if you never act on them.
Yeah, that's the superego, judging and criticizing.
Holding us to standards that might not even be realistic.
So it's both our savior and our tormentor.
In a way, yes. It keeps us on the right path, but can also make us feel terrible.
It's complicated.
Very. And this internal conflict, it plays out on a bigger scale too, just like individuals have superegos. Freud argued that societies develop their own collective versions.
Collective superegos. Interesting.
It's this set of shared values, morals, ideals that guide behavior and maintain order.
Like a giant overarching superego for everyone.
Exactly.
Shaping our beliefs, our sense of right and wrong.
Powerful stuff.
But it can also be, like, tyrannical, right? I mean, think about all the times societies have imposed rigid rules and punished people who didn't conform.
Definitely.
So these cultural superegos, could they become just as neurotic as our individual ones?
That's a great question, and one that Freud explored. He suggested that just like individuals can develop neuroses.
Those patterns of thought and behavior that causes so much trouble.
Right, he thought entire civilizations could exhibit similar tendencies.
Wait, a neurotic civilization, what would that even look like?
Imagine society is riddled with anxieties, fears, rigid beliefs, so stuck that they can't adapt to change,
That's familiar.
where people feel oppressed by the demands of the group. Always on edge, struggling to manage conflicts and stay stable.
So are you saying that civilization itself can be a source of discontent?
Yeah.
That all this progress and advancement might actually be costing us psychologically?
That's exactly what Freud was getting at. The more civilization demands of us, suppressing our instincts, conforming to rules, sacrificing our desires.
The greater the potential for unhappiness.
For both individuals and societies as a whole.
This is getting pretty heavy. So if Freud's right, is there any way out of this mess? Can we balance individual needs with the demands of civilization without driving everyone completely nuts?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's one we'll tackle in the final part of our deep dive.
So we've explored a lot of heavy stuff. Civilization, it's got its discontents. Our inner lives are like this battleground of instincts and societal pressures, and even whole societies, they can have these neurotic tendencies. But where do we go from here? Is Freud saying we should just ditch civilization and go back to, like, living in caves?
Not quite. He actually recognized the incredible progress that civilization has brought us, in art, science, technology, how we organize ourselves.
It's allowed us to build these amazing things.
It's what lets us live together relatively peacefully and productively.
But he also saw the downsides, the psychological costs.
For sure.
So it's not about throwing out the good with the bad, more like trying to make civilization work better for us.
Right.
Lessen the discontents without losing the benefits.
Exactly. Freud was really interested in figuring out how societies could evolve to find a better balance between individual needs and collective living.
And this is where his ideas about religion come in.
Yeah.
We touched on this earlier, but I'm still a bit foggy on how religion fits into all this.
Well, Freud saw religion as a way humans cope with the anxieties of life.
Life can be scary and uncertain.
Absolutely. He viewed religion as a kind of collective neurosis.
A collective neurosis.
Like this system of beliefs and rituals designed to provide comfort and meaning in the face of all the unknowns.
Okay, so it's like a giant security blanket for humanity. A way to soothe our fears and make sense of a world that can feel chaotic.
Exactly. It offers explanations for things we don't understand, promises of an afterlife, and that feeling of belonging to something bigger than ourselves.
It gives us a sense of purpose.
It does, but it also comes with a lot of rules and restrictions.
The thou shalt nots of many religious traditions,
Right, and Freud saw those rules as another form of the superego.
both individually and culturally.
Precisely. These rules are attempts to control our instincts, to keep our aggression in check, to maintain social order.
So in a way, religion is a way to manage our anxieties, but also to keep us in line.
You could say that. He argued that while it can provide meaning and structure, religion can also become oppressive, ultimately contributing to the very discontents it's trying to solve.
So it's both a source of comfort and a source of control.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating. But it paints a kind of bleak picture. Civilization has its built-in discontents. Religion offers solace, but can also be restrictive. So what's the way forward? Is there any hope?
Well, Freud, being a man of science and reason, didn't offer easy answers.
No magic solutions.
But he did believe that by understanding the forces at play, our deep-seated drives, the tension between the individual and society, the role of culture and religion, we might be able to create a better future.
A less neurotic future.
Exactly.
So it all comes down to awareness, recognizing how our minds, our societies, our institutions shape our experiences, both the good and the bad.
You got it. Freud's work is really a call for greater understanding, a more nuanced and compassionate view of ourselves and the world.
This has been incredibly thought-provoking. It really makes you consider the choices we make, individually and as a society, and how they shape our lives and the future.
It's all connected.
So we've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive. Freud's theories, the complexities of civilization, some big questions about humanity. If Freud was right, and the price of civilization, some level of discontent is a price worth paying.
That's something each of us has to wrestle with on our own, but understanding the psychological forces within us and around us, can help us make better, more fulfilling choices.
This deep dive has given me a lot to think about.
Me too, and I hope it's done the same for you. Thanks for joining us on this journey through Freud's Civilization and Its Discontents. Keep exploring these ideas, challenge your own assumptions, and join the conversation about what it means to be human in this complex world.